Hello, welcome to the IMHCA Talks podcast. My name is Shana Boger, and I represent the Iowa Mental Health Counselors Association. I am here today with Shana Boger. Hi, Shana.
Hi.
Um, Shana is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she is also a CADC. She works at a practice called Mosaic Family Counseling Center here in Des Moines. And today we were going to talk about her unique approach to addiction, recovery, and trauma. So I guess I wanted to jump right in, Shana. It seems like you are wanting you've been around the block. You've been worked in inpatient and outpatient treatment before, and you've identified some people who might be slipping through the cracks with the system, and are looking at or are designing new ways to reach those people. And I was wondering if you could speak more about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, I have been around the block and I've worked in inpatient, outpatient substance abuse treatment centers and now have been with Mosaic Family Counseling Center off and on here since 2018, and I love it here. And one of the things that I love is that we approach things from a trauma-informed lens, which before I got my master's degree, I didn't have a lot of knowledge about trauma-informed care. And so the more that I learned, the more that I took back to the treatment setting with me where I was working at the time, and I noticed some gaps just throughout my work in inpatient substance abuse treatment. And I guess, to give an overview, which a lot of the therapists, listening will probably understand and agree, is that a lot of treatment facilities primarily use CBT, and I think cognitive behavioral therapy for those who don't know. Um, and I think that while that is a great approach to address some of the behaviors and the symptoms of addiction, I think that sometimes when people leave treatment, some things go untreated or unnoticed if people aren't really, vigorous about getting mental health therapy afterward. And so, really, I've learned a lot about EMDR and using that as an approach to substance abuse treatment and aftercare. And so that's kind of how my view has shifted, and the approach that I typically use with people coming from substance abuse treatment.
Great. Yeah, so I heard you mention aftercare, and I know that's something that is big for you, that you haven't seen a lot of people thinking about or considering. I'm wondering if you could speak more to what you mean when you say aftercare.
Sure, definitely. So aftercare, I consider aftercare anything that's after an inpatient or outpatient treatment stay. And so, inpatient treatment ranges anywhere usually from 14 days to up to 90 days for some treatment programs from what I understand. Um Outpatient can be a few months long, and then aftercare is the care that you're getting after that, the follow-up, the ongoing, how am I nurturing my recovery and what does that look like? And I think that there are a lot of people falling through the cracks like you mentioned, with aftercare specifically. CBT does a great job of getting people where they need to be for the short term, and aftercare is where we get people for the long term. And aftercare traditionally is, you get a sponsor and you go to AA and you go to NA, and those programs are absolutely great. But I think that what I found, at least in my own practice, is there are plenty of people that get to the end of their inpatient or outpatient treatment stay and they say AA is not for me, or I don't like NA, or it's just not helpful. And, that's for maybe a variety of reasons. The two that often come up the most when I interview people and ask them why, it's because either the spirituality aspect, if they hear AA or NA, sometimes they will just write it off because they're like, I don't believe in God. And so then they don't get aftercare because they're not doing that. because that's not, part of their own philosophy of life. And another reason is because people are anxious and a lot of people don't like doing group therapy or speaking in big groups, or they know people that are in those groups. And sometimes that can be a barrier. And I think that, again, I think that in treatment centers, I've worked in them, I support them. But oftentimes, we say AA and NA get a sponsor, and that's how you do it. And for those people who don't like that, they'll leave treatment and they won't have aftercare. And I think that then we are leaving, part of our community unserved. And so I
What
think that it's important that we help them in any way that is helpful to them.
Yeah, yeah. So what does effective aftercare in your experience look like for those groups of people who say AA and AA isn't for me?
Yeah, sure. So, I think it looks different for everybody, and something that I tell the people that work under me here at Mosaic Family Counseling is that, if someone comes to us for substance abuse, and they're in recovery, if they like AA and they like NA, we're going to drive that home all day long. Absolutely, we're going to support that. But if they don't, then it's our job to find what works for them. And I will say personally, the approach that I take, because I see a lot of people just for individual aftercare. So people that aren't going to, AA, NA, or any other support group, because there are other options out there, but some people just write them all off. And so I do like to work with that population. I think a lot of times we see that as defiance from that population, that they just don't want to get better. If they're not willing to go to those meetings, that they don't want to get better. And that's not true. Sometimes it is, but most of the time it's not. And so part of my work, just here at Mosaic as a therapist on the staff, is to see people for individual aftercare. And my approach to them is doing a lot of EMDR, which eye movement desensitization, reprocessing. But there's lots of approaches within the EMDR spectrum, modality. And something that I work with clients on is just finding out what is their negative belief. What are those beliefs about themselves that are impacting their use and their behaviors? So, and their thoughts about themselves. So, a lot of negative beliefs that, that I find in my work with EMDR with those that are struggling with addiction and recovery. A lot of those negative beliefs that come up are, I'm not good enough. I'm a failure. I'm unsafe. I'm not comfortable in my body or as who I am, right? And so I'm using for those reasons. And so EMDR really just gets down to the bottom of it, really the root of it, within themselves, and helps them work through that and clear that out and process that so that it's not so intense for them.
Yeah, yeah. I'm wondering, so you've identified that you use EMDR to identify the negative beliefs that are driving the addiction. And I'm wondering what it looks like specifically for substance abuse versus like other uses for EMDR. I think most people associate it with trauma, and I know that substance abuse and trauma are often related, but I'm wondering if there's any like anything that comes up regularly with substance use that doesn't maybe in other situations.
Yeah. Well, I will say that that for I think 99% of people, yes, addiction and trauma go hand in hand. We specialize in trauma here at Mosaic Family Counseling Center. All of us do. And I think that largely since we do work with trauma, we see a lot of substance abuse, even if we don't see it on the surface. It is there because it's a symptom often of trauma and coping with trauma, right? Um, with EMDR, yeah, the difference is, it's the same stuff of identifying those negative beliefs and processing those, clearing out, traumatic memories related to those beliefs and connected to those beliefs, and taking that link away. But also, there's different protocols for EMDR and addiction. So, there are protocols that can help reduce the intensity of a trigger. And so I use some of those protocols with people. There's protocols that really target a feeling state. Oftentimes we get really scared of feelings about feelings. And so, addicts and alcoholics, people in the recovering community, they're no stranger to that concept of being scared about certain feelings or having feelings about feelings. And so there's protocols to address that as well. And then there's protocols that also will help, break the link between, using and that drug of choice and using, and the maybe maladaptive positive belief that someone might have, about their substance abuse, such as, if I drink, then I'm more sociable or I'm more likable when I'm drunk or high. That's an irrational maladaptive belief, right? Someone is not more likable just because they're using or drinking.
You've made a mention of several different protocols that you use that are effective in EMDR, and I'm assuming that you've had some sort of specialized training with these specific protocols. Am I right in that assumption, first off?
Yes, yes, you are. Yeah. So, for any therapist, the first step is getting EMDR trained and taking that basic training. And so I've done that. But EMDR and addiction protocols, there's a few different trainings that you can take. I trained just to learn about all the different chunks and different parts of working with EMDR and addiction. I took a training with Hope Payson, and I thought she was wonderful, learned a lot from her. I'd like to take more trainings to learn more, and just to be a more competent therapist in that realm, because I do see so many people either, actively using or in recovery, in early recovery.
Great. So, just to reiterate, the name you gave was Hope Payson. Is that
Hope
correct?
Payson, yeah, yeah, she does a training. I think it was 2 or 3 days that I took a training with her, and I would highly recommend for any other therapists that are interested in learning more about EMDR and addiction. If you've already taken your basic training, highly recommend working with Hope.
Great. Great. Sounds good. So I know that you're the substance abuse and recovery services program coordinator at Mosaic, and I'm wondering what the program that you are managing, and I assume have built part of. I wonder what that looks like.
Sure, yeah. Well, I would say that we're probably still in kind of a baby stage of, of creating a new program under the Mosaic Family Counseling Center umbrella. But yeah, for about the last year and a half, yeah, when I was working in an inpatient treatment center, came back, and Kenya, my boss, Kenya Rocha, asked me to take on some additional work and create a program for to fill some of these gaps that I had identified. And I said absolutely because I love working with this population of people. Right now, what is set in our program is it's just aftercare primarily right now. And so I have a group called Relationship Repair and Recovery, and that is for people who have been sober for 3+ months. Treatment is not a requirement, but sobriety is, because you got to be sober to work on your stuff. So, and that group meets on Wednesdays from 4:30 to 6 p.m. every week. And that group is really just to process relationships with self, relationships with other people, family members, close people in their lives, talking about how those relationships have been impacted throughout the course of their active addiction, what looks different now that they're in recovery, navigating the differences in what those relationships look like. And then again, we do circle back and do quite a bit of work with relationship with self and talking about those negative beliefs that I mentioned. We do a lot of that work. And then, in recovery, reinforcing some positive or adaptive beliefs that they have about themselves as well. That I am strong, I am good enough, I those certain things were not my fault within my active addiction, within my life, with all of my traumas. And so really addressing that, that's what relationship repair and recovery is all about. And that's an aftercare group again for people 3+ months in recovery. Treatment is not a requirement. And then this spring, it is my hope that pretty soon we'll be able to start a family group, which is very similar, in the structure, but it's just for people that are supporting someone in recovery. So, family members often have their own kind of addictive behaviors in response to, the loved one in their life using, and they have their own negative beliefs about themselves. For example, the parent of an addict or alcoholic in recovery, they often think that it was their fault, that they did something wrong as a parent, and so processing a lot of that within that family group. That's something that I'm really excited to offer, and that will get started as soon as I've got enough people for the group. We're going to get that started and generate some growth there for people.
Yeah, it seems like you're kind of mirroring the AA and then Al-Anon type or populations at least.
Right, and it's definitely different, in that, those are support groups, and we offer more of a process group, right? It's more of a therapeutic, group in nature, but they also have that support, and I would say that the group that I have right now, they're fantastic, and, half of them really love AA and NA, and the other half, they it's just not for them, and that's okay.
I'm wondering if you could explain that distinction you made between a support group and a process group.
Oh, sure, sure. Let me think about how best to explain this. Well, I think the biggest distinction is there's a therapist there, right, facilitating. And while we are there for support, it's more of a process group in that there is feedback allowed, and encouraged, quite frankly. And so we have an open dialogue with each other. And I, as the group facilitator, I facilitate that, and it generates not only support but growth. I would say therapeutic growth. They do have therapeutic goals, whereas in a support group, maybe they don't have those identified. They're just going just simply for that support. Everyone that's in our relationship repair and recovery group, they all have a treatment plan. They all have specific goals that they're working toward. They all have different relationships that they're targeting on improving throughout that group. And so I guess those are some of the main differences.
It seems like a big focus of yours is on the relationships part of substance abuse recovery. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we want to focus on relationships because that comes back to attachment, building healthy connections and attachments. That is something that is so, so important in recovery. And I will say that's one of the reasons that AA and NA and 12-step meetings just as a whole work so well, right? Is because we're making positive connections. And so above all, that is what I want out of that relationship repair and recovery group, is for people to have positive connections and know that they can have positive connections with others and with themselves.
what have you found? What kind of unique recovery have you found that you haven't really seen elsewhere within your groups, or don't see as much elsewhere?
Hmm.
I don't know.
I Yeah, I think that I'll bring it back to maybe the growth piece. I think that something that maybe our clients see that maybe they aren't getting elsewhere, or maybe they aren't getting as quickly elsewhere, is that we really dive into those roots and those negative beliefs about self and the adaptive beliefs about self. And I think in other programs and other modalities, we look at things like character defects, and our structure is different in that we look at those negative beliefs that are there internally, but then we switch that script and we change the narrative so that they have adaptive beliefs about self. Does that answer your question?
So I think so.
Okay.
You,
Okay.
you mentioned too that so you're kind of offering an alternative to AANA, but also a lot of the people who are in your group also they do both. They like both. And I'm wondering if there's any discrepancy or conflict or any ways that your program doesn't overlap with those.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that well, actually, could you rephrase that question? Now I'm putting you on the spot. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, are there ways that the AANA programs come into conflict with the program that you're running? Are there ways that they just don't jive with each other that you found?
Hmm. I guess maybe this program has not been running long enough to notice anything like that. I will say that I don't discriminate here against anybody that is involved in any of those programs. I just want to offer another way forward for people who don't like those programs and then just write off recovery as a whole because they're not getting support anywhere, you know. And so I will say, like I said, my group right now, they're very split in that half of them love AA and the other half just they haven't had good experiences or they're too anxious to go and so they don't, it's not for them. And you know, one of the ways that I have structured the group is you know, I tell someone when they join our group that, hey, you know, there are people here who really get a lot of benefit out of AA and NA, and then there are others who don't. So either way, we're not going to push. So whatever works for someone, we're going to support that. And I've told my staff that as well, that if one thing or another isn't working for someone, we're still going to work with them and we're going to find what works.
Great. You mentioned that you're mostly focused on aftercare right now, and that kind of makes me think that there may be ideas for the future for other gaps that you could fill and um, other timelines of the process. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Um, yeah, we're focusing on aftercare right now. Treatment, just quite frankly, is that's a big undertaking, you know, to have a whole treatment program for a number of reasons. And aftercare is one of the first gaps that I noticed, and so that's what we're targeting first. I will say that we did just receive our license for providing substance use disorder assessments. And so kind of the beginning of the spectrum and the end, you know, we have both sides of it and just kind of missing the middle. But I will say that I think that you know, the treatment centers that we do have in our state, they do a great job. You know, I've worked for two of them. I think that both of them do fabulous jobs. And so does everybody else in the state. So I really want just a working relationship, you know, above all with treatment centers that are standing as of now, um, just to be able to refer those people maybe who struggle with their programs because of 12 step, you know, an AANA.
I like to ask too, what brought you into the substance abuse field? It seems like you have a strong passion for it, and I think we can kind of get a sense of the why behind it, and that can make the how a little bit more clear.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't been asked this question in a while. um, yeah, so I have my bachelor's degree in addiction studies, and I got that from University of South Dakota, fabulous school. I actually started there as a nursing major, but some family members of mine struggle with addiction and in their own ways. And so I got curious, and one of their majors at University of South Dakota was addiction studies. And so I took like the intro to drugs, intro to alcohol courses, and I was hooked. I was like, absolutely, like this is what I'm meant to do. And so so I got my bachelor's, and while I was getting my bachelor's degree, I took a working with families course, and learned how to do some family therapy type stuff with people in recovery, and in treatment and their families. And that is when I decided I was going to get my LMFT. I thought, I want to work with whole families. You can treat the addict or the alcoholic that is coming in for help. You can treat that person, but if you don't look at the bigger system, they're going to keep coming back through. If you don't help them find that support or reinforce that support that they have, they're going to keep coming back through. And so that's when I decided to get my master's degree. So I guess it kind of just happened because nursing wasn't for me. So learned that very quickly, that certain things just were not for me, and addiction studies was. And had an internship at Manning Recovery Center. Loved it there, worked there. I've had experience working at Powell Chemical Dependency Center. They're fantastic. I've got experience as a substance abuse counselor and family therapist in those settings. So, um, and I've just yeah, with being in a different type of practice now, I just have a little bit more free reign to fill some of those gaps, that maybe you can't in some different settings. And I will say that, kind of shout out to my boss, Kenya, for being so supportive of my work with addiction.
You said when you were taking those college classes about alcohol, you got hooked. And I'm wondering what hooked you.
I think I think that growing up, as we all do, we have our belief systems and the way that we view the world and we view certain populations, and just the way that it happens, in our minds. And I had a view in my mind of what I thought addiction looked like, and I had heard, different things, whether it be in society or in my family, about addiction. And when I was taking those courses, I found that, while some of those things were true, not all of them were. And I suppose that's where I started, seeing some gaps just in insight, from the people around me. And I just learned a lot more about that population and how, underserved, I think, in a lot of aspects that population is. And I wanted to help. And, some people in my family don't want help. And so I want to help the ones that are presenting, that are willing to do the work to figure it out and figure out what healthy recovery looks like to them.
You mentioned a few inpatient treatment centers where you worked, and that they were positive experiences for you, and they did a lot of things right. And I'm wondering what the right things that they're doing are that you've identified.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Connection. That's what they're doing right. No matter what their structure is to treatment, like I said, a lot of it is CBT, along with some other modalities as well. But I think that the thing that every treatment center, I've not met all of the people that work in treatment centers, but I think as a whole, in our state, people do pretty well with connecting with other people. And again, when we bring it back to um, one of those root causes, is the unhealthy attachment patterns. And so if we can build that connection and, show people that connecting with people is okay, and that you can make safe connections in this world, then people come a long way. And so I think that, at Manning when I worked there and at Powell when I worked there, they have people working there that love what they do, and they also loved working with the population served. And I think that that's important.
What kind of unhealthy connection relationship patterns do you see most frequently with this population, and what are ways to address those that have been useful?
Mm. I think that, yeah, unhealthy connections, gosh, they can come from everywhere. For some people, it's their family of origin, where they learned unhealthy connections, or they had traumatic experiences in childhood, or, growing up and then into adulthood, that led them to seek more unhealthy connections, I think is the biggest thing. And, if you look at people who struggle with chronic addiction, it's they're using friends, the people that they're around. Those are unhealthy connections. And, all of us just want to be accepted and want to find connection. And so sometimes, we find connection with someone and it's not always healthy, but sometimes we see it that way. And so with treatment and aftercare, it's opening the lens of what does a healthy connection look like, both with myself and with other people.
Are there any common mistakes that you see therapists making or just support people in general making when working with people who have substance use issues?
Yeah, I think again, I think in our state we have great clinicians that are working in addiction. But I think probably the biggest thing that I see is that if a client is not responding to treatment that is presented and how it's presented, that it's seen as defiance if it's not working for them. And I think that if I were to name one mistake or mishap that I think is happening in the addiction field, that is it. Is that we see certain behaviors as defiance. You know, I hear people say, addicts lie a lot. Yeah, they do. Um, and I think some people take it personally, and I never do. You're lying for a reason. You're lying to get a need met in some way. And so exploring that, rather than if the treatment doesn't fit somebody, it seems like sometimes, it's like, well, they don't want to be sober, or this just isn't going to work for them. And and then again, like I had mentioned earlier, I feel like then we end up having a population that's highly underserved. And I think we need to offer more for people. And I think that we're getting there, as a whole. I think that we're offering more holistic approaches. There's refuge recovery now, which is more, it's still spiritual. Um I think that if I'm remembering correctly, it's the Buddhist approach to recovery. And then there's like yoga of 12-step recovery. So there's 12-step meetings that include yoga, and I think that's great. And so I think we're well on our way to offering more for people. But I think that we just have to, as addiction professionals, sit down with people, and if something's not working, figure out why, and figure out what they are open to, and what they, at their level of functioning can do. Like I had mentioned, some people, if I ask them why they don't like going to AA, it's like, well, I'm too anxious. Like, okay, so it's not that you don't like it, or you're not getting anything from it, but it's that you're so anxious that it's hard to sit in that group of people. And so sometimes if I can work with that person individually for a few months, then I can get them to go to a group setting. And I can, use some motivational interviewing to do that, to get them to that place. But, I've seen a lot of people in my individual work that people call defiant, and they're not defiant. They want recovery just as much as anybody else does. Now, do you sometimes see people who are defiant? Yes, I have. I've been called names. I've had things thrown at me. All the things that sometimes you see in those settings. Sure, that stuff sometimes happens, but by and large, I think that there's a large group of people who are seen as defiant, and they're not. They just haven't found what works for them.
When you have somebody come in and they're carrying that baggage of having that defiant label placed on them, what are some approaches that you use?
Mm. I like to use a lot of solution focused. I'm very solution focused. So I'm not going to drill into their heads, you have to do this because this is what works. I'm going to ask them what has felt comfortable or what has worked before. And sometimes they say nothing. I say, okay, well, let's find something different then. Let's explore that together. But also, yeah, with defiance, I just approach it with I think the big thing that I learned throughout my years, as a therapist, in the beginning, I took that stuff personally. I thought that people were upset with me, um and I had a mentor while I was working at Manning that said, excuse me, that said, if they get mad, it's not about you. If they get better, it's not about you. And if they don't get better, it's not about you. And so I try to remind myself of that. And I've told countless other therapist colleagues that as well, because if they approach, or if they, present in my office with defiance, it's not about me. It's not about me.
I'm wondering, with therapists who maybe are newer to working with people with substance use issues, or maybe lack confidence in that area. I'm wondering what kind of advice you might have for them.
Yeah, I think that working within the substance abuse and addiction population, I think it can be very taxing and very difficult. But one thing that I found with my years of experience is that it is so worth it. And it makes me emotional even just thinking about it, and that people do get better, and sometimes it just takes some patience. That's the number one thing. Patience, and really connecting with someone as a person and being genuine, because I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but they can they can spot bullshit. They have a bullshit meter. And so if you can just be genuine and have patience, I think that is the biggest piece of working with this population, because when you get to see someone, when I worked in inpatient treatment, I would have clients come back and bring their families, and introduce me to them, and say, hey, like, I have kids now. I always wanted kids and I never thought I could do that, and I have kids now. Or I've been able to hold a job, for a couple of years and I love it, or I'm going back to get my degree. When people come back and they can say those things, I think that it makes it all worth it. It makes it all worth it. And even if someone doesn't think that they can make it and they don't have the hope that they can, get on the other side of addiction, one piece of advice that I would give some clinicians, is to offer to hold that hope for them until they're ready. I tell my clients that a lot. If they say, I'm never going to get better, that happens in my office a lot. I'm never going to get better. Things are going to be this way forever. And I'm a terrible person. I'm like, well, you're not a terrible person. It might be really hard to see that now. Um, and I understand that, you're in a way where you feel really, really hopeless. I can see that. I hear that. I understand that. Um, so maybe while you're in this place, you can just let me hold the hope for you for a while. And when you're ready for it, then we can share it together. And then when you're really ready, I'll just, pass the baton to you.
That's great. Thank you. um, I feel like we've covered a lot in just a short period of time, and you've given a lot of valuable insights. Um, I'm wondering if there's anything else that you feel is important to say before we end this interview.
You're right. We have talked about quite a bit in a short amount of time. But no, I feel like we've covered some really great points. Yeah, I think just to recap, I think that we have some really great addiction professionals in the field. I think that it's important that we all keep a working relationship with each other, to refer people, back and forth for whatever is most appropriate, for whoever's presenting to us. If any professional is having trouble with working with someone that's more defiant, or that they've exhausted all the treatment options and they're not sure what to do, I would love to work with those people. So, and see what I can do to help, and see if we can maybe take it back to some of those roots and negative beliefs and clear some of that out.
How can we get in touch with you?
Great question. You can call me at Mosaic Family Counseling Center. You can find us on Facebook, on LinkedIn. You can visit our website. We've got a new and improved website that's pretty cool. So you're welcome to peruse that if you'd like to. And that would cover where to find us.
Great, great. Well, thank you so much, Shana, for taking the time to interview. And I wish you luck in the growth of your program in the future. It sounds like you've got a lot of good things coming down the pipe.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. I really appreciate your time.